He's actually great as a director. He should have been a director for a long time, I feel like. Due to his personality, his staff are very loyal to him and his ideas are very keen. He's a great director.
Just put your trust in me, it's gonna work out alright.
We have a habit of assigning a certain image or brand to studios. Production IG makes this kind of show, PA Works makes this kind of show, but sometimes something can come out that throws all of those expectations out of the window. But in the case of SSSS.Gridman and its successor SSSS.Dynazenon, it's not just Studio Trigger that I misjudged, but its director Akira Amemiya himself. Before now, we knew him from a short Gurren Lagann film, Ninja Slayer, Inferno Cop. He's even been described as a quote Padawan to Promare's Hiroyuki Imaishi and joined the studio purely because he was a big fan of him. But SSSS.Gridman is different from anything Imaishi has created before. Where Promare is loud, most of Gridman is quiet. Where Kill la Kill is bombastic and in your face, one of the big appeals of Dynazenon is in its subtlety. We've known the animator Akira Amemiya for many years, but in being reintroduced to him through Gridman and Dynazenon, it turns out he's not just one of the strongest directors at the company, but one of the strongest in the industry at large. This video is a sequel to one I made in 2017. In that, I explored how Trigger was set up and focused on the career of Yo Yoshinari and his work on Little Witch Academia. But I promised a second part, and the idea with that was to talk about other talents within the studio. One of the people I had in mind, for instance, was Mai Yoneyama, the brilliant animator and character designer of Kiznaiver, who now focuses on her independent illustration works, with one sequence getting 500,000 likes on Twitter. I also wanted to talk a bit more about Hiroyuki Imaishi, who found a place in the industry as a wild and energetic creator after basically recreating the entire premise of the short film Dead Leaves to fit his own style. Since my last video, he's created Promare, a collaboration between Trigger and the 3D artists at Studio Sanjigen. This is the culmination of Imaishi's experience and style, an unendingly creative film that you can't take your eyes off for a second. But now, in 2021, I want to focus on Akira Amemiya and his attempt to create something entirely different from what we'd expect from Trigger or Tokusatsu as a genre. The project started when Amemiya approached the company Tsuburaya Production with a request. He wanted to make an Ultraman anime. And he got turned down, so he asked, okay, what can I have? And they offered him a couple of options, including Gridman. At the time, Studio Kara was setting up a new project, the Japan Animator Expo, an opportunity for a bunch of creators to basically make whatever they liked. Trigger got to do 3 of these, and Amemiya used this as an opportunity to make a Gridman short film titled Gridman Boys Invent Great Hero. The result was the kind of thing I expected from Amemiya, with a bunch of fun homages and action reminiscent of his work on Gurren Lagann. Unlike a lot of those that would go on to help him create SSSS.Gridman, Amemiya was actually a fan of Gridman the Hyper Agent as it aired in 1993. For much of the younger staff at the studio, it was still boomer stuff to them, but that ended up being an advantage. With the short film as a toe in the water, they progressed in creating a brand new vision for Gridman, separate from the appeal of the old story. And so, with a team that had little attachment to that, they were able to create something brilliant and new that appealed to more than just fans of the source material. In contrast, Production IG and Solar Digital Arts, who did manage to get the rights to make an Ultraman show, ended up making a straight up adaptation instead, using the 2011 manga as a base. It's not like we were missing out though. In fact, they got an Ultraman writer of their own to help them craft this new vision of Gridman. Akira Amemiya had planned out an initial story, but it was screenwriter Keiichi Hasegawa who worked together with him to recreate it into something that balances out the flavors between tokusatsu and anime drama. Gridman and Dynazenon are split into 2 distinct parts. There's the battles, and then there's the not battles. But the thing about a lot of tokusatsu is that even outside of the fights, it can still be pretty dramatic, and that's the case with the original Gridman as well. Cheesy music, cheesy shots. But despite, spoiler, Gridman not existing in the real world, Amemiya's direction makes this feel like a surprise. There's no music in most scenes outside of battles. Instead, Amemiya has trusted the sound effects team to create a soundscape for each and every area that the characters visit. And the voice actors now need to work harder than ever, since the emotional weight of their scenes have to be carried by their performances alone. Amemiya's idea was to have things feel slow, yet tense. There are mysteries afoot, but these are just teenagers living normal teenage lives.
怪獣じゃない?
In some ways, a lot of scenes can be considered dull, but in others, they feel natural. One long shot where Yomogi and Yume are hanging out at Tokyo Summerland ended up trending on Twitter because of how absurd it felt for anime. But because of this slow, methodical pace, when they head into battle with loud, exciting music, the contrast makes it feel more dramatic than ever. I used the word subtle earlier, and that's in regards not just to the sound direction, but the animation as well. Amemiya is an animator in his own right, and so he has been able to create a unified vision where the character motions feel just as quiet as the audio. Quick glances, smaller considered motions, it's very untrigger. But in that same way, it's also very trigger in that they're a studio constantly open to different creative visions. This is a team that thrives on original series, and so unlike adaptations, it's up to their artists to decide how they tell a story.
どこ?
やっぱり見えた。
見えた?
SSSS.Gridman was accomplished at this, but Dynazenon took what they learned and went further, creating an incredibly compelling character drama as well as a compelling mecha series. I had goosebumps through all of episode 12 as they delivered perhaps the best episode of a mecha show I've ever seen. Audio, animation, design and voice acting all coming together to create a crescendo of emotional impact. And this was the efforts of a young, passionate team at Studio Trigger who were able to achieve this without any major intervention from the studio's veteran directors Hiroyuki Imaishi and Yo Yoshinari. In fact, the character designs were drawn up by Masaru Sakamoto, and Gridman was his first time within this position. And so, much like how it took way too long for Akira Amemiya to become a series director, it took too long for Sakamoto to become character designer. And that's because these guys are distinctive, comfortable, and well animated. These anime are reinterpretations of a show from the 90s, but it feels more modern than most shows created today.
どこ行くの?
こっちかな?
Comfort is a big part of modern fashion, and so not only are the characters frequently posed in comfortable, natural ways, but their outfits are often the sort of things you could imagine real people wearing. And in Dynazenon, it works to contrast them with Galma and the Eugenicists who don't quite fit in. This is also used as a narrative point for Chise. Her outfit doesn't look all that comfortable, but when you finally see her in a school uniform, you realise, yeah, this doesn't suit her. She was better off in her neck-hung top. Character designs are narrative, but they're also function. They need to be easy to animate, which is why an animator like Masaru Sakamoto is in charge. As both chief animation director and character designer, he knows how to push these character designs to the limits. And so when a star animator like Trigger's Kai Igarashi takes the reins for a dramatic episode 10, he can employ an angular dynamic style that's a little off model while keeping them recognizable. All this movement is easier to achieve when a design has less line work. And in fact, overly detailed designs can lead to the animation struggling. This is one of the culprits for the production quality of Graphinica's record of Ragnarok recently. But Graphinica isn't really known as a 2D studio to begin with. In fact, they're more well known for doing 3D animation on shows like SSSS.Gridman and Dynazenon, for instance. Brought it back around. The 3D fight scenes in these shows are very deliberate. Technically, they could have animated them in 2D. It would have been more work, but they did it for the original short film. But Amemiya felt that 2D animation has a habit of imparting too much of the animator's personality, and so instead, he left it up to Graphinica's 3D 3D team. It was their job to make these fights genuinely feel like two people in suits battling, and even when they created great animation work, Amemiya would sometimes give feedback asking them to make it look intentionally worse, as if all this action was performed with wires and stuntmen. The 3D artists then went on to watch a bunch of tokusatsu to achieve this look. Having Graphinica handle the tokusatsu battles also ended up being advantageous in the show's attempts to bring in more and more complicated kaiju designs. They didn't have to turn down complex ideas just because they were difficult to animate, and it's not like they were rolling out 2D animation completely. There's still plenty of 2D effects and occasionally 2D mechanical animation, like the transformation into Super Dragon King Kaiser Grid Knight, a scene that I'll probably never be able to get out of my head. By working closely with the 3D artists, they can create a show that both follows and breaks the rules of tokusatsu action. Dynazenon represents both the breadth of skill within and outside Trigger's walls, and also the studio's encouragement of original creative approaches to their shows. It represents the long overdue debut of Akira Amemiya and Masaru Sakamoto into lead roles, and it makes the announcement of a Gridman cross Dynazenon follow-up even more exciting. In an industry that's constantly trying to pump out as much shows as possible, it's invigorating to see shows with as much care as these two. But I should probably include a depressing bit. A few years back, I visited the Animator Supporters Dormitory. It's basically a charity effort that gives underpaid animators a place to stay for a while with reduced rent. One of the animators there had a Studio Trigger lanyard on. Later, at Liberty City Anime Con 2018, the dormitory lead specifically stated that Studio Trigger has a terrible working environment. And more recently, in 2020, the General Union reached a settlement with the studio over unpaid overtime work. Trigger is able to achieve ambitious visions, but not without underpaying their team and sacrificing their well-being. In some ways, it's unsurprising that their next big project is an adaptation of Cyberpunk 2077. Thanks for watching The Canipa Effect. Trigger has stated they're striving to improve working conditions, but while I'm skeptical, let's pretend that's true to leave this video on a positive note. I'd like to thank Howard Wimshurst for voicing Trigger producer Masato Takeuchi at the start there. His channel is all about animation, and he's an animator himself, so he's way more qualified to talk about all this stuff than I am. Go check him out. But before I go, I'd like to thank these incredible people for supporting the channel. In particular, I'd like to thank Austin Hardwick, Dedameat, Eddie Leheka, Edwin Shale, Equinoctes, Faux Wizard, Frizzy Canadian, Frogkun, Fujay, Jacob Bosley, JR Pictures, My Own Mother, Nolan Soga, Quentin Elkin Smith, Robert Miller, and Tom Araman. If you'd like to support more studio spotlights, please consider visiting patreon.com/thecanipa effect.